always felt that somewhere deep inside of me there was a great athlete waiting to be let out. Life experience has not proven that to be true. Until college, my only organized athletic venture was middle school football, and the only thing my coach ever said about me that was nice was that I was coachable. So, I hope that's still true. So in my childhood, all my desires for athletic glory could only be fulfilled by proxy, by my beloved Indiana Hoosiers basketball team. Now, the Hoosiers won the national tournament in 1987. I won't tell you how old I was then. A moment that is ingrained in so many of us little Hoosier kids' hearts and minds. I remember my grandpa coming home from driving a semi-truck for RCA up in Bloomington with trucker caps, the mesh back ones that are becoming popular now, but they weren't cool then. The trucker caps for me and my brothers emblazoned with the national championship scoreboard on the front. And the score, Indiana 74, Syracuse 73. Oh, yeah. So, Keith Smart from the left side, I can still see the shot in my mind. So, imagine my joy when in 1989, just 2 years after they won the national championship, I learned that my mom had started cleaning the home of our physician, Dr. Sengalang, who was also the team doctor for the Indiana Hoosiers. Never had my mom seemed so cool. She was probably, at that point, the coolest person I had ever met. Her cool points went up even further when she told me and my brothers that we had been invited to a team party at Dr. Sengalang's house. I mean, I was nervous for a month. I worried over what I would wear. How could I wear generic tennis shoes in front of these guys? How would I show them how much I love Indiana basketball? Should I buy a pair of the candy stripe warm-up pants? That was probably too much. Finally, the day arrived. I don't remember everything about the evening. I remember that quick as lightning shooting guard, Chris Reynolds, signing my IU basketball calendar on the hood of somebody's car. I remember how tall the big red-headed guy, Chris Lawson, was. And of course, the red hair made him seem even more impressive. But I do remember one moment as clearly as if it was yesterday. I rounded the corner into Dr. Sengalang's living room, and there on the couch sat Greg Graham and Calbert Chaney. If you don't know these guys, I still love you, but suffice it to say, they were my favorite players. They both ended up playing professional basketball. They were sitting there on the couch playing Nintendo Golf, a game that I knew how to play. If I'm not being humble, I was pretty good at it. And I wanted to play so badly. I just watched for a minute or two, and then miraculously, Calbert Chaney turned to me, controller in his hand, and said, "Hey, get in here." And I said, "No, thank you." No, thank you. Had I really just said that? I'm sure it was the combination of my adolescent insecurity and meeting my heroes that caused this life-altering blunder, but whatever the reason, I just didn't feel like I belonged there on the couch playing video games with Greg Graham and Calbert Chaney. Feeling we don't belong someplace costs us something. Now, I've moved through my grief about the Nintendo Golf incident mostly, but we can see the same issues in more serious places, in schools, in houses of worship. Even sometimes in our own families, we internalize the idea that we do not belong. It can be devastating, this sense that there's no seat for us at the welcome table. Against the forces of loneliness and perceived isolation, we Unitarian Universalists assert that everyone belongs, not just on the margins of society, but as full participants in its big decisions and as beneficiaries of its prosperity. As the King Center folks write in their definition of beloved community, Dr. King's beloved community is a global vision in which all people can share in the wealth of the earth. In the beloved community, poverty, hunger, and homelessness will not be tolerated because international standards of human decency will not allow it. Racism and all forms of discrimination, bigotry, and prejudice will be replaced by an all-inclusive spirit of sisterhood and brotherhood. What we do in Unitarian Universalist congregations is an attempt at creating that kind of community in micro form. So in our congregations, as our worship associates often say on Sunday mornings, and they did this morning, you are welcome here. No matter whom you love, from whence you come, your gender identity or expression, and on, you are welcome here. That wide welcome is deep in the heart of our theology as Unitarian Universalists. You may know already that Unitarian Universalism is the product of the merger of two religious traditions, the American Unitarian Association and the Universalist Church of America. Both were historically Christian traditions that broadened over time to include people from all faiths and those who identify as agnostic and atheist, all spiritual beings seeking truth and meaning together. The Universalists' main message was that God was love, and the God of love wouldn't punish anyone forever. And the Unitarians and the Universalists agreed that none of us deserve punishment anyway. Everyone is born worthy. Everyone has something important to contribute. Everyone belongs. This is the heart of beloved community. Now, each of us has work to do to receive that welcome. Because, like me standing there with my hero handing me the Nintendo controller, our own perception that we don't belong might cause us to shy away from the embrace of community. I've seen this drawing. I can't remember where, and I couldn't find it for this morning, but let me try to describe it. A number of people are sitting around one of those circle conference tables. They're obviously talking about some important thing in some important meeting. But behind, sort of hovering behind each person, is one or two or three ghost-like images of people whispering things in their ears. Might be a critical parent or a grandparent, or maybe it's a spouse who really believes in a person. But I'm convinced that this drawing explains things as they really are. When we're talking with folks, there are voices behind them and us. Stories surrounding us, in our ears and hearts and minds, whispering messages. One of mine is the message that my father has stated more than once, that family and love are more important than just about anything else. But for all of us, there are probably negative voices too. You're not good enough. This isn't the place for you. Well, here's what Unitarian Universalism says to that. You are good enough. You were born good enough. And if you can assent to the covenant of this congregation, then you do indeed belong here. You belong right in the middle of things, making big decisions and contributing as you are ready. You have a whole lot to offer the world, and Valley Unitarian Universalist congregation is the lesser when you can't bring your offerings fully. You belong here. It takes a lifetime of hard work, often work with a professional counselor or therapist if we're fortunate enough to have access to that, to become aware enough of those voices to talk back to them in a productive way. But VUU and UUism in general aim to be one place where you are invited to be who you are without repression. Out in the wider world, there are plenty of folks saying something different. And they aren't whispering right now, are they? Protections for the most vulnerable are under threat. As was the case, honestly, under the previous two administrations, deportations continue to rise, though the hateful tenor of that effort is ramped up in the past couple years. I think this is part of the reason participation and membership in congregations like this one are growing right now. People who are on the margins of power in our society are under attack. And here is a place where we can do two things. We can work together to make it better, to really move toward a vision of beloved community. And we can create a space where, unlike so many other places in the world right now, folks can feel like they belong in all of our diversity. We don't always do it well, but we try to say, in a million ways, big and small, you are welcome here. Okay, now look. Before I say what I'm about to say, and it's a little critical of us, let me say that I do love us. We can be kind of frenetic, and, a lot of us have been accused of hippie-like tendencies, but you all are just amazing human beings. But there are some unhealthy things that happen, even in communities like this one. So let me say this carefully. Every person is welcome in beloved community, but every behavior is not. In order to preserve an atmosphere in which all people truly are welcomed as full participants, there are some behaviors that we cannot smile and bless or pretend they aren't happening as a congregation. It is a sad truth that faith homes like this one are sometimes easy places for bullies to do their worst. Of course, people can be bullies for evil causes and for good ones. Although there's a place for productive conflict, and I'm going to talk about that next week, as we work toward embodying the beloved community, there is no place for insult, for name-calling, or for insisting that in every disagreement we always get our way. I sometimes say that democracy requires us to be good losers, and that's certainly true of congregational life. Our allegiance to beloved community principles is tested when we're on the losing side of a vote, or when we sense we're in the minority in an opinion that we hold dearly. Congregational life, if we're full participants, will test us. It will require us to discern when to speak up and when to yield, when to insist and when to hold back. Here at VUU, some years before my time, folks worked up a behavioral covenant to help remind us what we aspire to when it comes to our behavior here at VUU. We haven't focused on it much in my 6 years here, but this morning I invite you to read it with me. As members and friends of this congregation, with a common purpose to nurture each other in our religious community, we hereby covenant to welcome everyone who comes to VUU on an honest and responsible spiritual quest, search for community, to accept and respect the differences among us, to listen actively and respectfully, to trust in the inherent good faith of each other, to create an atmosphere where all of us feel safe, to practice forgiving each other and ourselves, to focus our discussions on topics, ideas, and issues rather than on people, to speak directly to those with whom we disagree and work toward resolution, to speak out with loving kindness when we witness inappropriate behavior or disrespectful interactions, to be respectful of our staff's time and commitments as professionals, to take responsibility for our behavior, hold ourselves accountable, and keep the commitments we make, to practice replacing they with we to begin the phrase, ought to do something, to trust the process, accepting and supporting our democratic decisions while acknowledging that we may not always agree, to remember that building our beloved community requires active participation. These covenants shouldn't be used as bludgeons. I don't think we need behavioral covenant police. This covenant is intended as an agreement we make together about how we'll be with one another. Ideally, it can serve as a reminder to us of what's appropriate and what's not, even when we're passionate, even when we're convinced we're right and not everyone else is convinced of the same. And it can call us back to relationship when we get sideways. Because we cannot move toward beloved community. We cannot really include everyone in a meaningful way when there is a person or a group of folks taking up all the airtime, insisting on their own way, and bullying people into doing what they want. And let me say that the time when that's not happening, which is like right now, is the time to talk about it. So I'm not talking about you. I've done this before. When we are too scared of conflict to confront that kind of behavior, we let it build more and more and more energy until months or years later, the conflict we were trying to avoid is 10 times worse than it would have been if we had just communicated directly in the first place. Anything goes is not what liberal religion is about. Because anything goes means the most aggressive, the loudest person will always rule. The goal of beloved community requires more of us than that kind of passivity. Healthy boundaries and redemption after they've been broken must both be a part of our wide welcome. Someone once told me that liberal religion was too easy. They clearly didn't understand what we're up to here. Working toward beloved community is difficult. It requires each of us to be working on ourselves, even as we do work here in community. But friends, it is important. It is life-changing, and you belong. Not on the margins, not on the outside looking in, not sometimes. You belong. When your experience is otherwise, let's work together to take one more step toward beloved community. May it be so. Amen.